What is up, y'all? Good to see you today. In this video, we're going to take a look at my most recent mountain bike film, The Road, featuring Mark Matthews, that I produced for Marin Bikes. If you haven't checked out that video yet, hop over to Marin's page. The link is down in the description below, and watch the full video, and then come on back here, and we're going to break down how we went about making this film, some of the things that didn't go so well, and some of the stuff that ended up working out great. So let's just get into it, and we'll start watching from the beginning. I'm going to pause it a little bit throughout the video and tell you a bit of what I was thinking from the point of view of storyline and things like that. So at this first part of the video, I really wanted to make sure that bikers that were interested in seeing a shred edit that didn't have much story realized that there was more to this video, and so I made sure that I included these shots at the beginning here that really showed off some of the cool riding that happened during the video and not lose those people that saw that the video was 5 minutes long, a bit longer than your average mountain bike video. From here, we start to get into some of the basic storytelling pieces of that this is going to be a road trip. Mark's talking a little bit about some of the reasons he likes to road trip around BC. When I was done shooting, I was home working on the edit, and I just could not get the edit to come together. I hadn't shot enough talking pieces while out in the field with Mark to actually weave the story together in a way that made sense and was engaging. So after the fact, I had to go and set up this interview with Mark. We talked for about an hour. I asked him a bunch of questions about the trip, and once I had that material, the edit started to work. So, you know, if things don't go well in an edit, sometimes you might just need a little bit more content or a different angle to attack it to be able to tell the story you're trying to tell. But my biggest lesson from this was keep shooting even when the action is done. Make sure you're capturing all that lifestyle stuff and make sure you're getting lots of the main characters talking to the camera, because this is what's going to allow you to weave your story together. And our first location that you'll see in the video is Whistler. And the thing that's a little bit funny about this is actually the last thing we shot on the trip. Because I wanted the final destination to be Della Creek, which was the epic campsite, epic final trail, we actually decided it made more sense to put Whistler at the start of the trip. This first section, that's what you're seeing. We've got some establishing shots of some areas outside of the Whistler Bike Park, and then we see Mark dropping in. And these first couple shots here, actually right here, this is actually footage that I shot with Mark earlier. It has nothing to do with this trip, but he was wearing the same clothes, same bike, and the forest looked pretty similar. And I needed something to lead us from this road trip piece of the video into the riding. So these slow motion shots kind of guided that in and allowed for this first shot to make a little bit more sense. And then from here, it's just lots of angles of Mark ripping down this trail and connecting the interesting features with sections of trail that would just show him moving quickly and be able to link together all the stuff that made the trail interesting to watch. Some of these shots you'll see I just do really subtle digital push-ins and pull-outs and things like that, just to add a little bit more interest to shots that would otherwise be a little bit static. One thing to keep in mind, anytime you're working with a professional athlete, particularly with mountain biking, every time you're getting a shot, that rider has to push their bike back up the hill and do that run again. And so you're both needing to be really on top of your game to make sure those shots look really good. But you also want to realize that you've only got so many opportunities in the bag before the rider's going to be too tired to ride well and to ride safely. And so for this particular trail, we were able to actually hike up the trail and note the features that we thought would be interesting to shoot. And then we had an idea in our minds, okay, we need to be able to have Mark do this another 15 times or 10 times to make sure that he still had the energy to be able to ride safely and look good on the bike. So something to keep in mind, you've only got so many shots in any given day when the rider has to go up and down the hill a number of times to get different angles. From here, we headed to Lillooet, which was actually our first location on this particular trip, and we're getting some establishing shots of the type of terrain. We really wanted to show off the diversity of BC in this video. Mark is also an avid trail builder, and so the beginning of this, I wanted to show off the work he was doing to make this jump line rideable again. This first day, we spent about 8 hours just digging and building and fixing up this trail. And we got a little bit of riding shots at the end of the night as he was testing the line out a bit, but we were saving most of the riding for the next day. And when we got there the next day, we arrived at about 4 o'clock, so we'd have some good warm-up time and plenty of time to shoot in the golden hour, which, you know, everybody wants to be shooting at that time. But when we got there, the wind was just whipping, and Mark couldn't ride in those conditions. It's pretty unsafe. It can push his bike off of the trail, and some of these jumps have a pretty narrow landing. And so we sat around for about 4 hours just waiting for the wind to die down. And fortunately, we had a window right at the end of the night. We had about an hour left before sunset where the wind died down, and we just had to nail all the shots as quickly as possible. So this first shot that you'll see here, I'm pretty proud of. It's a drone shot where I'm tracking Mark the entire way through the line. And this took about 4 takes to really nail it, have him centered in the frame for most of the shot, have his riding look good. At the end here, I cut away a little bit early because he actually had a crash into a sagebrush, flipped over his bike, and landed with a bunch of cactus in his back. But it worked well enough, and with the time constraints that we had, we decided we could cover that up with an edit because the rest of the riding that he did looked really good. And then we jumped in to get as many close-up shots as we could. And we also had Mark do a run with his GoPro, having lots of extra footage to work with to intersplice between those tighter shots. Really pulled the whole video together. So this section came out really great. I'm really happy with it, especially because we only had about an hour of shooting to get this all nailed down. But you'll see at the end of this, it was pretty dark. We got this nice silhouette shot, but then after that, we had to call it. This next section where we're seeing Mark coming out of the tent, this was actually shot at the beginning of the trip, but I put it here because it made more sense from a storytelling point of view to really keep bringing home, like, this is a multi-day trip and we were camping throughout, and I didn't want to put too much of that establishing stuff at the very beginning and slow the whole video down. So this is a moment to breathe, let that first song that just played out kind of fade away before we transition into the next section. And the only thing I wish I would have done better here is I wish I would have started to hint at the big mountain lions that he was headed to ride in Spence's Bridge, because that was intended to be the culmination and the coolest part of this entire video. But in the end, that part didn't work out because the lions were totally beat up. So if I had hinted at that a little bit earlier, I think I could have built up a little bit more tension, and it would have led to that climax of, oh, we can't ride this spot. We've got to figure out something else to do. And we start building up the next song here as we're moving towards the next section of the piece. The other thing here is I wish I could have actually shown more of the trail that had been destroyed by rain versus just that one shot of the whole area. I think it would have looked a lot more interesting to see why we couldn't ride there. But in the end, I didn't get that footage and had to make the best of it with the edit. Glad I got to include Darren in there, though. This day, we didn't really know what we were getting into. This trail, this looked cool from the photos that we had seen. So we got there at sunrise, this beautiful ponderosa pine forest, and we just shot as quick as we could because we really wanted to get to Della Creek. The thing that's kind of interesting about this is we actually only used a really small section of the trail. It was the most interesting part with the trees. And so Mark just did a number of different lines through that section, and we got a different camera angles that allowed it to look like a longer section of trail than it actually was. At the end of the day, I think it was better to show more of this area while we had the really nice light because it was super beautiful, and it acted as a nice, like, you know, stopping off and doing this quick shred while on the way to Della Creek. As we were heading to Della, I really wanted cool establishing shots because this terrain was so beautiful. And I mean, look at this campground. You get to camp right at the top of this beautiful view, and then the trail leaves right from the campsite right into mountain biking. So it's a pretty epic spot to be, and I really wanted to highlight that at the beginning of this section. Again, showing some camping to make sure we're communicating that this is a multi-day trip. We're on to day 6 here. And then the final shred. And for this, I wanted it to feel relaxed and sort of like culmination, not like too intense. And I felt like Mark's riding looked really fluid and he looked really comfortable. And so I had a little bit more of a laid back song for this section of the video, but still lots of really fast riding to connect that all together. This is a really long trail, and so we opted to shoot the top section, which had a lot of cool features, and the night before, Mark rode the whole trail to see what was in the middle section, and we opted for just the top and the very bottom where it became a bit more deserty, like here. Just pieced a couple of those shots together to wrap up that piece of the edit. And then again, wrapping up at the campground, really just having those reflections from Mark, thinking about why he loves road tripping, and just some epic shots of this beautiful valley that we had here. That was the basic thinking of the whole video. The pieces that really could have gone better were the storytelling. This was probably a bit more of an undertaking than I should have taken for my first full-length mountain bike film. Having a story-based edit is way more complicated than just a mountain bike shred video. Some things didn't go as well as planned. We were supposed to meet up with some people on the trip that was going to give us some opportunities for Mark interacting with somebody and create a little bit more opportunities for those lifestyle shots to come out. That didn't end up working out. A couple of the places we went to ride didn't end up working out. So things don't always go as planned, but you have to make the best of it, especially on a multi-day trip where there's a lot of variables that are out of your control. We still had a super good time and ended up with a pretty cool video at the end of it. If you've got any questions about the process or any of the equipment I use, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I'd be happy to get back to you about those. Otherwise, get out there, make something beautiful, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.